Hi everyone, I'm Michael Paxton, Head of European Business Development at Canto. I help brands manage their digital content so they spend less time keeping track of files and more time creating, innovating, doing the work they actually want to be doing. So today we'll be looking at some of the biggest challenges that brands face in managing their content, and more importantly, how they can fix these problems if they sound a little too familiar. So let's start by looking at the problem. One of the reasons more brands are struggling with file management is that many companies are really ramping up their digital content production. Things like product images and marketing photos, but also video content, design elements, brand templates, documents, and style guides. Creating all that digital content takes a huge amount of resources, and that's something brands know to budget for, whether that be in-house or with external collaborators. But what people don't always anticipate is that the more content that you create, the more it takes to keep track of it. On the average marketing team, each staff member spends a total of 13 days each year filing content and searching for files. Multiplied across a whole organization, that's a lot of time lost. Here's a fairly typical scenario. Someone on your sales team needs a graphic for a presentation. You vaguely recall that a designer created something similar last year, but you can't find the file anywhere. So you Slack your colleague. Does she know where it is? No, but she knows which designer probably did create it. By the time you actually get the image to the sales team, 3 people have interrupted their workflow. Now in that scenario, the person who needed the file got it in the end, but only because you remembered that it actually existed. But what if you didn't? We're finding that lots of teams are actually reproducing work that they've already done, and simply because files are lost, or nobody knows the content even exists. So let's take a look at an example. Say you need a specific series of images for a website update. You contact a photographer, not knowing that your predecessor actually commissioned a similar photo shoot from someone else 3 years ago. It's not just that you don't know where to find those images. You don't know that they exist in the first place. These are the types of problems customers come to us with every single day. Most brands out there are working with files that are decentralized, meaning they've got some files in Dropbox, some stored locally, even some on Google Drive, SharePoint, OneDrive. Unsearchable, meaning there's no way for team members to find and discover existing content. Not contextualized, meaning it's not always clear which content is approved or which file is the most up-to-date version. And content that's walled off, meaning sharing digital files externally is a huge hassle that requires copying them to a different system. These problems have a noticeable impact. We conducted a survey of marketers and found 46% of them have worked late because they lost time hunting for digital files. An even greater number said searching for content is a frustrating waste of their time. And of course it is. People don't want to be searching for files all the time. Designers want to spend their time designing, video producers want to be producing videos, and marketers want to be planning campaigns. So how can we win back your team's time and focus on the important stuff? Let's break these issues down and look at some of the ways to manage them. First, let's return to that group of colleagues trying to track down a file. The first step towards an efficient file management system is having a system at all. And honestly, a lot of brands don't. Most customers that actually come to us, they typically have content in numerous locations, whether that be a server, hard drive, shared drives. Often most people don't even know where that content is. Next, you need a system that works. If you're just keeping your files in folders, you'll need a complex folder structure and file naming conventions to find anything. Those systems tend to fall apart pretty quickly as people start cutting corners. Someone in a rush thinks that they'll go back and rename the files later, and of course, they never do. By relying more on tags and other ways to provide context, you can make the process of finding content far more intuitive, even if you don't remember the project or the file name. So let's take a look at how that type of setup might actually work in a digital asset management system. So this is an example of the Canto interface. So this could be any branding, so logo of your choice, background color, the layout. We can launch into any folder, album, types of asset, whatever you choose as a default in the system. And what's familiar to a lot of people is the ability to have that folder structure that you're familiar with in the tool. So in here, you could replicate any folders, subfolders, albums in any way that you already exists, or that can also be adjusted inside Canto. And if you're using tools such as a OneDrive, a SharePoint, Google Drive, Dropbox, we can actually log into those tools from inside Canto, select any of the relevant folders or the content, and we can migrate that straight into the system. And then the next time you come over here to your structure, that content would already be visible inside the tool. And this could be any types of assets. So whether it's images, videos, audio files, Adobe, documents, PDFs, and so on, any file type. So it doesn't matter. Additionally, when it comes to actually searching to find your content, there's a few ways to do this. Obviously, you can navigate here through the folder structure on the left-hand side. Additionally, we have the filter option over here on the right. And this is where you can include any tagging information, custom fields, and any other relevant info that you want to include to quickly sort and find your content. But before that, you can search using the search bar. So here where you would have your previous search terms available, it's predictive. So as soon as I start typing, it would give any options around those. And this is where we can search globally across the entire DAM. So whether that be based on a file name, a description, an author, a keyword, a tag, or any other relevant field, you can decide, and you can also set defaults for your colleagues so that when they log in and start to search, it would already pre-populate certain fields for them. This can be a global search across the entire system. You can search within results, and you can also combine terms. So here, I could look for London and a bus. I could look for London or a bus. It's really up to you. And for popular searches, you don't have to keep actually adding them in time after time. You can save those queries and then come back to them and reuse them again. So for example here, if I wanted to find any asset that contains London and a bus, this is where I would find it. So for example here, this asset has been found because we've got AI tagging in the background that's detecting objects inside Canto. So in the asset here, it knows that this is a bus, transportation, people, and we also know that it's London from the tag above. Additionally, in Canto, we also have AI tagging included with videos as well. So for any videos that are uploaded into the system, the AI tagging can generate objects in those as well. And also on the document side, for any documents inside the tool, all the text inside a document is actually searchable as well. So you don't have to go through and try to find, I remember what particular words were in that PDF or that presentation. Canto will actually extract that text, read it, and it's all available when it comes to using the search bar. Additionally, we've got the filter. So we touched on that briefly before. This is where, for example, retailers may have like SKU numbers, product IDs, project information. And this can be pick lists, it can be text that people enter, even down to the status of the asset. Maybe you only want to find content that's currently approved or pending approval. You can predefine this, and you can also even search by the people in your organization. So for example here, any image or video that contains a particular colleague or prominent person that we want to include, we only have to click on their name once, and we'd find every asset that they are included inside the system. Now let's go back to the problem of companies recreating the same content every few years. Teams invest a lot of time and money into digital assets they only use once. Then because of poor file management, it sits neglected in a folder somewhere until people forget it exists. Companies can get a lot more value out of those assets just by reusing them. We've already talked about how advanced search features and AI tagging can help teams rediscover forgotten content. But another issue is that team members aren't always sure how they should use digital content that they find. Digital asset management isn't just about storing files, it's also about making sure they're ready to go when your team needs them. There are a few things you can do to keep your content current. So once you've found an asset that you actually want to use, you can click on that asset. You'd have your initial information here. So this would include metadata, file name, could be that tagging info, the AI tagging. Additionally, any other information around licensing right, usage details, even links to websites where you're currently using that content as well. And the nice thing in here is you can also collaborate on an asset, and you can keep track of the full asset lifecycle. So in here, let's say specific users would have the ability to upload a new version of an asset. Additionally, certain users would be able to go in and roll back to a previous version, and you can compare assets side by side. So you can have a a preview just to see which one you want to make to be the current version. Additionally, controlling the status of that content is critical. So which content should be seen and who by, you can control this here. So you can decide whether content is pending approval. So maybe there's going to be a new project range or a new product going live. Then here you can set content with an auto-approve date. So we could set this so that, let's say from the start of April, this content would now go live at a particular time and time zone. Additionally, you can also restrict content so it wouldn't be visible to anyone else other than an admin inside the tool. And you can also approve content and even have auto expiry dates. So maybe you've got content that contains a person or there's only consent to use it up until a particular point in time. You can already have that set to automatically expire at the end of the month, the end of the year, or whenever you need to. And from that point on, it won't be visible in any location. Only an admin would be aware of its presence beyond that time. Another important thing here is the ability to see what's happening with that content. So this is where you'll be able to have a running log to know who's been viewing that content, who's downloaded it, shared it, and anything else around kind of the statistics, the usage. We've got reports and dashboard functionality as well. So far, we've talked about how digital asset management saves time by making it easier to find existing content, but it can also save a lot of time creating content. That's because the more you create, the more people are involved. That's a lot of versions of lots of files going back and forth. In terms of actually managing content and bringing content into the system and working around kind of a workflow as well, you do have the ability to collaborate. So inside of the tool, you have the ability to annotate on an image, a video, and you've also got that version control option as well. And this is also where a lot of customers tend to use tools such as Adobe. So for example, Canto is available to access inside Photoshop, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, and InDesign. And just to give you a bit of an example, in InDesign, you would already have access into your main library. So all the content, the structure that you typically have in your main Canto interface is also accessible here. So you could go in and navigate based on the structure. So whether that be by folders, additionally, you could just search for content, find that content, and now you'd be able to utilize it. So for example here, I could select assets, I can insert, replace, even draw a frame, and it will pop in. And the nice thing is you're going to have live links between Canto and InDesign. So it's going to warn you, is this the current version of that content? It's got a traffic light system, so it would warn you if there was a new version available, and it would also be red if this was an expired asset, prompting you that you need to update it. Additionally, if you wanted to save this content back into Canto, you can also do that. So from inside here, I can make any modifications and then save this back into my Canto interface. So the next time I'm back in Canto, that content would already be available for me to utilize inside the tool. Additionally, this is the main library inside your Canto account. But if you've got content, for example, lots of customers might have a photo studio or be working with agencies. So they'll want to have separate areas that only specific people can access. So we have a feature here called Workspaces, and this is essentially for content that's in mid-development. So this is where you could give restricted access into specific power users for them to come in and basically upload, import, work on assets. They can also annotate with each other, perform any tasks, and then once that content's ready, they can just move this over into the main library or wherever they need to. So basically project areas that are completely hidden from everyone else. As you can see here, separate branding, separate structure, only the relevant people that need to would have access into these locations. Finally, you need a system not only to store and edit files, but also to share them. This is especially important if you're working with external distributors or collaborators. As you create a sharing system, keep in mind that it needs to be easy for your team to use, but also for the person on the other end. So one of the most important things, typically for a lot of customers, is how they're actually going to distribute and share their content. So there's a few ways that they can do this. So whether that be by sharing via a link or even through a social media integration, or additionally even tools like a SharePoint or OneDrive. Additionally for videos, you could also share through YouTube or Vimeo as well, although we do have video embed function available in the system. But here, a very quick way is just to use a share link. So this is a way to share content in a specific way with specific people. So here we can do this and choose an expiry date. We can also say this content never expires. You can password protect the link. You can include watermarks on any of the content inside the link, and you can control what are the permissions of the people that are going to be accessing this content. So here you can just generate a link, send it out. The actual guests here do not have to be a user of Canto. So they don't have to log in or don't have access into any other areas. Only the content that you've shared with them is going to be available. And then depending on the permissions you've set, this will determine what they can do. So can they download? If you've included digital rights in here, this would also be, they'd have to adhere to those digital rights before they could even actually access. Additionally, you could give them the ability to crop, to resize, compress, and also for presets. A lot of the time, people you're sharing content with might not know, what the size is for LinkedIn, for Instagram, Twitter, or even for their website. So you can enable presets so that people could just go in and select the relevant preset for them without needing to know what would the correct size be. It would automatically populate for them. Another very, very popular option on the sharing front is using a feature called portals. So inside Canto, you've got lots of different locations, folders, albums, and so on. But you can just share a subsection of your library with an audience of your choice using a portal. Portals can be public and available for anyone. They can also be private with only specific users that can access as well. And for example here, this is an example of a portal. So you can have any logo, text you want to include, background image, and you've also got that search bar and the filter functionality. But down here, each of these images represents a folder or an album from your main library. So this is a great way to share content. It's always going to be up to date with latest versions, latest content, and all of your digital rights and any of the permissions are predefined. Even down to the metadata and the filter can be customized. And for customers that have multiple brands, each portal can be custom branded depending on your preference. I hope this discussion has prompted you to see the benefits of well-organized content in a new light. The points I've discussed today cover the most important considerations for most brands. Depending on your use case, there may be more factors you want to discuss.